The Xerathian Empire did not ask. It commanded. For nearly 1,000 years, they had spread across the stars, consuming civilizations like a slow-moving storm. They were methodical, efficient, unstoppable. Not once had a species dared to resist. Until now. The Imperial Armada arrived in Earth's orbit with flawless precision, blotting out the stars with their fleet of gleaming warships. Their arrival was dramatic, as always, a grand display of power meant to intimidate the primitive species below. At the heart of the fleet, aboard the Imperial dreadnought Vengeance of Stars, stood Grand Minister Xerathian, the Unyielding. Xerathian had spent centuries overseeing planetary conquests. He was a seasoned conqueror, a master of diplomacy, a 700-year-old squid-lizard hybrid wrapped in ceremonial robes that cost more than most planets' GDPs. And today, he was here to bring another species into the fold. The humans. How quaint. He adjusted his posture, ensuring he looked appropriately menacing, and signaled his aide to begin the transmission. The message would be broadcast to every human leader, every military station, every device capable of receiving a signal. A single, undeniable demand. Xerathian stepped forward, spreading his arms as his image appeared across the entire planet. People of Earth, your time has come. Dramatic pause. The Xerathian Empire welcomes you. Your civilization will be allowed to continue under our rule. Bow before us, and you may serve as second-class citizens. Refuse, and you will be eradicated. His voice was calm, controlled, absolute. He waited. Every other species had submitted instantly. The logic was simple: survival or extinction. Xerathian stood perfectly still, basking in the moment, knowing that somewhere down on that primitive blue world, the humans were scrambling to... A response came through. It was brief, a single word, broadcast in every major galactic language. No. Silence fell across the entire Imperial fleet. Xerathian's eye twitched. He turned to his aide. Did the transmission cut off? The aide double-checked the systems. No, Minister. That was the whole message. A strange sensation settled over Xerathian. Confusion. No species had ever responded like this. Not once. Even the bravest had at least tried to negotiate. He cleared his throat. Perhaps they misunderstood the consequences. Yes, that made sense. He signaled for a second transmission. This time, he would make it clear. The Xerathians expected immediate surrender. Instead, humanity told them to screw off. And the Empire is about to learn why that was a mistake. Grand Minister Xerathian the Unyielding had never been ignored before. His species had subjugated entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. The moment an ultimatum was issued, the response was always the same: fear, panic, surrender. That was how the galaxy worked. But humans? Humans had responded to his official declaration of planetary enslavement with a single word: no. It made no sense. Clearly they didn't understand the severity of the situation. Xerathian signaled his aide. Transmit again. This time, ensure they grasp the consequences. The transmission went through. He waited. And waited. Finally, a reply came. Not a formal statement, not a plea for negotiations, not even a threat. A meme. Xerathian stared at his screen in abject confusion. A crudely edited image of himself as an Earth creature known as Squidward appeared, with bold human text reading, "Try it, Squidward." The control deck of the Vengeance of Stars went completely silent. Xerathian's breathing became shaky. "What is this?" he muttered. His aide shifted awkwardly. Minister, it appears to be a form of human psychological warfare." Xerathian's eye twitched. "So, they mock us?" "Yes, Minister." A slow, burning rage built inside him. "They dare to mock the Empire?" The comms officer hesitated. Minister, they have sent another transmission." Xerathian straightened. "Good. Perhaps they've realized their error." The message loaded. A 15-second video clip played. It featured a heavily armed human soldier standing in front of their flag, grinning at the camera. He said one thing: "Do it. No balls." Then the feed cut out. Xivac's tentacles curled into tight knots. This was no misunderstanding. Humanity was not afraid. Xivac took a long, deep breath. "Prepare an orbital strike." The demonstration was precise. A controlled plasma bombardment was fired into a remote desert, turning miles of wasteland into molten glass. It was a warning shot, a reminder of what would happen should humanity refuse to comply. The entire Xerathian fleet stood in formation above Earth, their weapons primed and waiting. Surely, this would be enough. They would see the raw power of the Empire and understand that resistance was futile. Xivac folded his arms. "Now, let us hear their—" A response came in. Xivac smirked. Finally. The screen loaded. A single message appeared. "Neat. Do it again. We want to see if you can make a perfect circle this time." Xivac froze. His entire body locked up. His aide, standing beside him, made a quiet, choking noise as he processed the sheer insanity of what they had just received. "Minister," the aide said slowly, "I think they're impressed." Xivac could not comprehend what was happening. "They are entertained by planetary destruction." "It appears so, Minister." Xivac stared blankly at the screen. The Xerathian Empire had just vaporized part of their planet, and humanity thought it was funny. The realization sank in like a dying sun, imploding into darkness. They had made a mistake. A horrible, horrible mistake. The Empire expected fear. Instead, humanity gave them memes and sarcasm. And now, Xivac has to decide whether to back down or escalate. Grand Minister Xivac was not accustomed to doubt. And yet, as he stood aboard the Vengeance of Stars, staring at the latest human transmission, he found himself experiencing a truly unfamiliar sensation: dread. The Xerathian fleet had just obliterated part of their planet, and instead of surrendering, humanity had responded with mockery and excitement. "Do it again. We want to see if you can make a perfect circle this time." Xivac's tentacles twitched violently. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled. If humanity would not bow, then they would be forced to kneel. He turned to his officers. "Initiate Invasion Protocol 77, full planetary occupation." There was no need for subtlety. The Xerathian Empire had never encountered a species that could withstand a direct assault. This war would be over in mere hours. The first wave of Xerathian soldiers descended into what human intelligence had marked as one of their major population centers: Australia. They expected resistance. What they did not expect was pure, unfiltered insanity. Within 10 minutes of landing, the invasion force was in shambles. Reports flooded the command center. "The local wildlife is attacking us." I repeat, the wildlife is hostile. Xerathian soldiers found themselves being hunted by giant spiders, venomous snakes, and massive birds that seemed to attack for sport. One commander screamed over comms, "A mammal just kicked my second-in-command into a tree." It wasn't even a soldier. It was a creature they call a kangaroo. Then came the locals. Xerathian squads, highly trained and armed with plasma weaponry, quickly realized that they were not the apex predators here. Humans, wearing nothing but shorts, sunglasses, and flip-flops, were punching them, for no reason. One distress call crackled through the command channels. "The humans are throwing glass bottles at our dropships. Why? Why are they laughing?" A single transmission from the human resistance in Sydney was intercepted and played across the fleet. "Oi, mates, we got some alien blokes down at the beach trying to start something. Who's keen for a scrap?" The channel erupted in cheering. Xivac's tentacles curled so tightly they nearly snapped. Still, Australia was only one part of the planet. The invasion plan proceeded, with Florida marked as another strategic target. This was the biggest mistake yet. The first dropships landed near the Everglades. The first casualties were recorded less than 5 minutes later. One soldier, barely escaping an ambush by an elderly human, dual-wielding a shotgun and a flamethrower, screamed into his communicator, "We are being attacked by a man on an alligator. He has a Molotov cocktail. He is shirtless and screaming, 'Y'all picked the wrong swamp.'" The Florida man. Resistance Army was born. Xerathian High Command was baffled. Who were these people? What madness had they stepped into? The answer came quickly. As one officer grimly reported, "The humans do not fear death. In fact, they appear to be enjoying this." The invasion force collapsed. Within hours, entire battalions were retreating, their forces in complete disarray. One exhausted squad leader, covered in mysterious bite marks, made it back to the fleet, only to collapse on the floor. His final words before passing out, "Send us anywhere else. Just not Florida." The reports kept coming. Xerathian sat at the center of the Imperial War Room, his breathing ragged, his mind unraveling. The invasion of Earth had been planned as a swift and brutal subjugation. Instead, it had become a humiliating disaster. "Minister," an officer stammered, clearly trying not to look terrified. "The humans have just sent us another message." Xerathian closed his eyes. "No," he muttered. "Don't show me. I don't want to see it." "Minister, I said I don't want to see it." Too late. The message played. A video of a human soldier standing in front of a barbecue grill, wearing sunglasses, flipping a burger. He looked directly into the camera and said casually, with no hint of fear, "That was fun. Wanna go again?" Xerathian's vision blurred. His body slumped into his chair. "We have made a terrible mistake." The Empire believed humanity would break. Instead, the invasion force is in full retreat. And now, the Xerathians must decide what to do next. Xerathian had never lost a war, not in his 700 years of service to the Xerathian Empire. Yet, here he was, watching his invasion force get absolutely humiliated by a species that, by all galactic records, should have surrendered weeks ago. Instead, his most elite warriors had been beaten, broken, and publicly ridiculed. His best tacticians had been outmaneuvered by swamp-dwelling lunatics riding reptiles. His finest strategists had been outwitted by people who still thought duct tape was a valid engineering tool. And worst of all, the rest of the galaxy was watching. The Xerathian Empire's once feared reputation was now being mocked in real time across alien networks. Something had to be done. Something drastic. Xerathian clenched his tentacles into tight knots. "Cut off their supply chains," he ordered. "If they will not submit through force, we will starve them out." His officers nodded grimly and set the blockade in motion. It was a flawless plan. No species could survive without the Empire's resources. No species had ever resisted a full planetary embargo. No one. Until humanity. The Xerathian fleet formed an imposing wall of warships around Earth, blocking all trade routes, cutting off access to food, water, and intergalactic commerce. For any other species, this would have meant a slow and painful surrender. For humans, it just meant they started using the apocalypse bunkers they already had ready. Xerathian leaned forward. "Status?" An officer gave him a smug grin. "The embargo is fully operational, Minister. Humanity has been completely cut off. Their resistance should crumble within days." Xerathian allowed himself a rare smile. Finally. Finally, they had found humanity's weakness. Then the reports started coming in. "Minister, there's a situation." "What situation?" The officer hesitated. "They're not reacting how we expected." Xerathian frowned. "What do you mean?" A screen flickered to life, showing footage from a hidden spy drone on Earth. What Xerathian expected to see: starvation, chaos, riots. What he actually saw, an underground bunker fully stocked with 40 years' worth of food. A man sitting on a couch, eating canned ravioli, flipping off the drone. Texans using a homemade railgun to shoot supplies into orbit. Pirates from Earth successfully hijacking a Xerathian transport ship and using it to smuggle Taco Bell off-world. Xivac's blood ran cold. How do they have so many resources? We cut them off. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Minister, humans appear to have been preparing for an apocalyptic event for centuries. Xivac's eyes narrowed. That is absurd. No species lives in constant preparation for disaster. A long pause. Then another officer spoke. Sir, have you heard of something called doomsday preppers? The human resistance was thriving. They weren't starving. They weren't panicking. They were thriving. Even worse, they were profiting. The blockade accidentally created a brand new, hyper-profitable human export: entertainment. Since humanity was cut off from trade, smugglers started sneaking into the system, not with food, not with weapons, but with USB drives full of YouTube videos, pirated movies, and human memes. And aliens could not get enough. Entire Xerathian officers were found watching human media instead of monitoring the blockade. A high-ranking general was caught quoting Monty Python during a tactical meeting. Entire planets started illegally trading human sitcoms and gaming consoles instead of military rations. The Xerathian propaganda network collapsed overnight. Xivac was losing control. The war wasn't just about weapons anymore. Human culture was infecting the Empire from the inside. Xivac couldn't take it anymore. Every strategy, every weapon, every tactical move had been met with mockery, memes, and sheer unhinged defiance. The war had dragged on far longer than expected. Morale was at an all-time low. The only way out was a decisive strike, a final show of force. Xivac stood tall in front of his remaining officers. Prepare the armada. We attack Earth with everything we have. This ends now. The officers saluted. It was time. The Xerathian Empire would finally break humanity. Right. The Empire thought a blockade would starve humanity. Instead, they created a black market economy fueled by memes and underground ramen stockpiles. Now, they're sending their entire fleet for one last desperate battle. And humanity is ready. Grand Minister Xivac stood at the helm of the largest fleet the Xerathian Empire had ever assembled. Thousands of warships, millions of soldiers, all aimed at one insignificant blue planet. Enough of this humiliation, he growled. No more games, no more delays. We finish this today. The final invasion of Earth had begun. The Armada jumped into the Sol system, moving with terrifying precision. Within minutes, Earth's skies were covered in Xerathian dreadnoughts, each one bristling with enough firepower to reduce entire continents to ash. This was it, the moment humanity would finally learn its place. Xivac leaned forward, breathing heavily. Target their capital. Prepare orbital bombardment. The fleet's weapons systems locked on. They had won. Then Earth's response came through. A single text transmission. You sure you want to do that? Xivac's heart skipped a beat. The first mistake the Empire made? They assumed humanity wouldn't strike first. The moment Xerathian ships moved into position, Earth's orbital defense grid activated, and it did not hold back. High-orbit railgun platforms tore through Xerathian capital ships like paper, launching projectiles at speeds that shattered hulls before the enemy even registered they'd been hit. Then came the missiles. Not just ordinary missiles. Humanity's special brand of, oh, you thought you had the upper hand. Technology. Some were hypersonic, some were AI-guided, some split into 100 smaller warheads mid-flight, and some were just nukes strapped to even bigger nukes. The Xerathian fleet wasn't prepared. Entire formations were wiped out before they even reached Earth's atmosphere. Panic set in. Xivac stumbled backward, staring at the impossible carnage unfolding before him. What? What is happening? An officer, pale and trembling, turned to him. Minister, the humans, He never finished his sentence, because at that moment, the drop pods arrived. The first wave of human soldiers didn't arrive in sleek tactical formations. They fell from the sky like vengeful gods, riding in heavily armored drop pods blasting death metal through external speakers. The Xerathian comms network lit up with screams. "They're dropping straight onto our ships. What kind of tactic is this?" The answer: it wasn't a tactic, it was personal. The humans had decided to board enemy capital ships by literally smashing into them at terminal velocity. Onboard cameras captured terrifying footage of armored marines ripping through bulkheads, laughing like maniacs as they stormed the command decks with guns, blades, and occasionally their bare fists. One captain screamed, "They're fighting us with melee weapons. Who still uses axes in space?" The human soldier in the footage grinned. "We do." Then he yeeted a Xerathian officer out of an airlock. The Empire's forces were breaking, and Earth hadn't even deployed its worst weapons yet. Desperate, Xerathian ordered the remaining fleet to push forward. They still had firepower. They still had numbers. They could still win. Right? Wrong. Because at that moment, the hacked AI fleet arrived. Xerathian watched in horror as an entire battle group of Xerathian warships turned on their own fleet. "Sir, they've taken control of our ships." The realization sank in. Human hackers had hijacked the Empire's systems. The Xerathian dreadnoughts, their pride, their power, were now turning their weapons against them. And then, as if to twist the knife even further, Earth sent one final message across all Xerathian channels. A simple video. A human general standing in front of a captured Xerathian warship, drinking from a coffee mug. The words on the mug? "Galaxy's #1 superpower." The general took a slow sip. Then he said casually with zero concern, "You all done?" The Xerathian fleet fell apart. Entire battalions surrendered on the spot. Xerathian collapsed into his command chair, his body trembling. "We have to negotiate." His officers turned to him, stunned. "Sir, we never negotiate." Xerathian stared at the wreckage of his once great armada. "We do now." The war was over in less than 24 hours. The Xerathian Empire, once feared across the stars, had been utterly humiliated. The humans agreed to stop the fighting, on one condition. Xerathian had to personally travel to Earth, and he had to apologize, in front of the entire Galactic Council, on a live broadcast. For the first time in his 700-year career, Xerathian felt true humiliation. But he had no choice. And so, before billions of viewers, the once mighty conqueror lowered his head. "On behalf of the Xerathian Empire, I formally surrender." The camera zoomed in. The human diplomat leaned forward. "And..." Xerathian's tentacles curled so tightly they nearly snapped. His voice shook with rage. "Please." The Galactic Council erupted into applause. Across the stars, thousands of alien species, once too afraid to resist the Empire, began chanting alongside their new human allies. No! The Xerathian Empire collapsed overnight, and humanity became legends. The Xerathian homeworld was placed under new management, by humans. Aliens across the galaxy celebrated their new overlords, not because they were conquered, but because they now had unrestricted access to pizza, movies, theme parks, and human entertainment. One former Imperial officer, still reeling from the loss, dared to ask a question. "Why did you resist?" "You could have lived in peace." A human general smirked. "We were at peace." He gestured to the wreckage of the Xerathian fleet. "You were the ones who screwed up." The Xerathian Empire thought they were unstoppable. They were wrong, and the galaxy would never forget the species that said, simply, "No."